Well, hey there! It seems that the whole wide world is immersed in the lore of Oz right now, with the release of the highly anticipated film adaptation of the Broadway musical Wicked. People are starting to dive back into their first journey to the Emerald City that they experienced in the 1939 MGM film The Wizard of Oz, the most watched movie in history, and in the most recent years has been being heralded as a holiday movie classic due to its frequent TV syndication during the later months of the calendar year. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into not only the most watched movie in history, but the most successful media franchise of all time, that is Oz, by looking at its roots as an iconic, beloved classic children's book, to later an unforgettable musical adaptation that has been cherished by generation after generation, to a long-running Broadway sensation that in the current day has its own film adaptation. So I think in order to understand Oz and its fantastical nature just a little bit more, we need to look at its creator, L. Frank Baum, who penned not only The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, but many of its sequels that included continuing tales of Dorothy's Oz friends, as well as other citizens of Oz. So L. Frank Baum was born into a very rich family. He was a very sickly child growing up and was plagued with health problems, which ultimately led to him being in social isolation most of the time, since he couldn't really go to school or go outside to play with other kids. Though he missed out on what some people would refer to as a normal childhood, this gave him a fuel for a very rich imagination, as well as a propensity for excessive daydreaming. He would spend hours and hours on end in his father's library, reading the works of Lewis Carroll and Brothers Grimm fairy tales. When he grew up to be an adult, he was somewhat of a career hopper, from being a writer for a local newspaper to being a poultry farmer. But he really shined in being a writer due to his extraordinary storytelling abilities. He used to spend his spare time telling his original nursery rhymes and fairy tales to his own kids as well as the local neighborhood kids, who would gather at the Baum residence regularly to hear his colorful and engaging tales. These tales led to his first publication, Mother Goose Prose, which received positive reception and paved the way for the mega success of The Wizard of Oz. And this guy, he had some very interesting coping mechanisms. A lot of these characters in The Wonderful Wizard of Oz were actually inspired by the characters that would regularly recur to him in his nightmares as a child. The Scarecrow, for example. One of these recurring nightmares included a scarecrow that would relentlessly chase him throughout a cornfield. And many Oz experts refer to this as him making friends with his nightmares by turning them into beloved characters for the readers of his children's books. Mr. Baum was very tortured poet department coded. There's also a theory from literary scholars that he subtly made The Wonderful Wizard of Oz a political and economical allegory of the Gilded Age, with Dorothy symbolizing the American people, the Scarecrow representing farmers, and the Tin Man representing industrial workers. Of course, L. Frank Baum always denied this, because it is a children's book, and I can kind of see where these literary scholars are coming from. I mean, kids don't know about politics and economics, so I personally doubt that L. Frank Baum had any conscious thought behind his story writing process for The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, that he had the intention to educate youngins about the societal hierarchies. After The Wonderful Wizard of Oz had great success, L. Frank Baum himself actually produced a stage play that was also really quite successful and even made its way to Broadway, which later inspired him to start his own production company. Based in LA, Oz Productions made several silent film adaptations to all of the other Oz books that he had written, but unfortunately none of the films received the same praise and adulations that the books or the Wizard of Oz stage adaptation received. So he cut his losses and shut down the production company and died a few years later due to ill health. Now, the MGM film with Judy Garland was actually not the first film adaptation to The Wizard of Oz. There was a silent film adaptation to The Wizard of Oz made after L. Frank Baum's death that severely strayed away from the main storyline. And when I say severely, I mean severely. You're not ready for this. You're not ready for what I'm about to tell you. In this fucking disaster, Dorothy was a young adult who was in a love triangle with the Scarecrow and the Tin Man. Yeah, I told your ass you weren't gonna be ready for this, but you just didn't listen. And the farmhands were not played by the same actors like it was done in the 1939 film. A troupe of separate actors were cast as Dorothy's Oz pals. But fast forward to 1939, well, actually, 1925, because MGM Studios had been working on a film adaptation of The Wizard of Oz since 1925. One whole ass decade. That's how long it took to get a production team that saw eye to eye professionally and creatively on the movie. One of the earliest disputes being who would play Dorothy Gale. Initially, Shirley Temple was considered for the role of Dorothy, but she was under contract with 20th Century Fox at the time. Back in the day, actors and actresses were assigned to individual studios to do their movies. Kind of like a W-2 employee, although I don't technically think it was a W-2 kind of employment. I don't know, it's been a long time since I first learned this stuff. Don't at me. Simply put, they were only allowed to act in movies that were being produced by the studio that they were under contract with. So they chose to go with one of their own, Judy Garland, who did have powerhouse vocals. A powerhouse vocalist that was under contract with MGM at the time. So director Victor Fleming has the director's credit in The Wizard of Oz, but the production switched directors several times. First it was Norman Tao, how do you pronounce this? This is the dude that covered the pre-production stage of The Wizard of Oz. Then Richard Thorpe came on the scene, but that guy only lasted for 2 weeks. And then they brought on George Cukor as a temporary replacement, and he was only there for a few days, but he made some of the most pinnacle changes to The Wizard of Oz, even though he was only there for a few days until MGM could find someone new. George Cukor is to thank for changing Dorothy's original blonde bombshell look to the Dorothy that we know with the brunette pigtails. And this was for a couple of reasons. A, it didn't make sense to have a farm girl from Kansas to be donning a perfectly colored, blonde, brushed out pin curl do. And B, he noticed that Judy Garland wasn't particularly authentic in her performance with the blonde wig. The reason they put the blonde wig on her in the first place is really disgusting and sad. The wardrobe department on set didn't think that she fit the beauty standard of the current time. So they tried to give her that bombshell look with the blonde wig. But George Cukor came in and he was like,
"Imbeciles! Let the woman and her hair be!"
And he was also the one responsible for recasting The Wicked Witch of the West. In the time that George Cukor was directing, The Wicked Witch of the West was being played by an actress named Gail Sondergaard. And her costume and makeup for The Wicked Witch was a lot more glamorous. She had like the fluffy lashes and the cat eyeliner, a black sequined gown and hood. Her getup was a lot more fashionable Hollywood. But then George Cukor wanted to change The Wicked Witch of the West's look into something a bit more scary, with the green skin and the pointed chin look. But I guess Homegirl didn't want to be seen as ugly on screen and just wasn't willing to do it for the bit, so she bowed out and paved the way for Margaret Hamilton to take on the role, the woman that we know today as the Wicked Witch of the West. And then once they did find a more permanent director, they brought on Victor Fleming, who directed the majority of the film, which is why he has the director's credit. But near the end of filming, he abruptly left to go work on Gone with the Wind, and all that was left to film were the black and white scenes. Black and white scenes? God. Y'all, I'm neurodivergent. My brain moves faster than my mouth. And all that was left to film were the black and white scenes of the movie. And those were directed by King Vidor. Now, many people are familiar with the on-set dramas of the film, like Buddy Ebsen, the original Tin Man, getting sick from the aluminum makeup needed to become the Tin Man, had to be hospitalized, and then was replaced by Jack Haley. Margaret Hamilton getting third-degree burns from a technical failure of one of the witch's disappearing act scenes. The Cowardly Lion costume weighing 100 pounds. Judy Garland not being able to eat anything besides lettuce and black bean soup to watch her figure. Yeah, I don't know what that means either. The snow in the poppy field having asbestos in it.
Asbestos. They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine.
I mean, the list goes on, and it should probably be its own video, but this was a very unsafe and dangerous movie to be filming. But it looks like the cast's torture wasn't for nothing because it turned into a cinematic masterpiece. Now, what's peculiar here is that it wasn't actually a masterpiece upon its first release. The general public didn't have that many great things to say about it, which led to it being a box office bomb. But when movies started showing on TV in the mid-1950s, That's when The Wizard of Oz finally got its household name. Every home with a TV in it regularly watched The Wizard of Oz and became a comfort watch for people all over the world. And the movie is actually very true to the book. And the only changes they really made were changing the color of Dorothy's slippers from silver to ruby, and Dorothy's trip to Oz being just a dream in the 1939 MGM film. A dream that she had from being hit on the head and passed out with a concussion. But in the book, Oz is real and happens in Dorothy's waking life. The Wizard of Oz has left an undeniable mark on pop culture and has inspired other forms of Oz media, including the countless cartoon series that have been made and inspired from The Wizard of Oz, as well as the R&B and soul musical The Wiz, which was also a stage production first and later turned into a movie musical produced by Quincy Jones and starred Diana Ross and Michael Jackson. And of course the Broadway musical that was adapted from What's-His-Face McGuire? I'm blanking on his first name. I just know his last name is McGuire. And I'm reading the book right now. God damn it. Oh. His name's Gregory Maguire. Wicked, the life and times of the Wicked Witch of the West. And now a best-selling box office hit at the cinema. Now, a recurring theme that we have observed as far as Oz media took some warming up to and received recognition years later. This is a reminder to both you and me. Stop trashing and rejecting your creations that don't get positive immediate feedback, because you may be way ahead of your time with whatever you're making. Now, it's quite apparent that L. Frank Baum's posthumous success of The Wizard of Oz and other Oz media has left a massive legacy and has stood the test of time and has outlived the lifespan of any other media franchise. Y'all, there are books written on the ruby slippers alone. There are even Oz historians. I don't know if it's an actual job title, but they exist. And with the rise of social media, there are several YouTube channels and TikToks and other social media accounts dedicated to Oz trivia and its rich history. If I'm going to be honest with you, I probably wouldn't be here today talking to you if it wasn't for The Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz was how I learned I was a theater kid and enjoyed performing for an audience. Every goddamn day from the ages 4 to 5 years old, I would put on my ballerina leotard, grab a basket, grab a stuffed dog, pop in the VHS tape in a VCR, and copy Judy Garland on the TV. Word for word, song verse for song verse, dance step for dance step. Let me know if your fondest memories of The Wizard of Oz and how, or if, it's left an impact on you. And if you watch this video all the way through, I would like to thank you for being a trooper and being kind-hearted enough to stick around and listen to me yap about The Wizard of Oz. I appreciate you more than you know. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed our time together. Please use your polite manners when commenting. And if you're vibing with me and you want to vibe more in the future, go find the button on your screen that says subscribe. When this channel reaches a couple milestones, I'm going to use it as an opportunity to give back to my local community, as well as share something with the whole wide world that I have never shared with anyone before. You all will be the first to know what it is. I elaborate more in the description box. Alright, now, stay tuned for a Wicked video. Pretty sure I'm going to have a lot of hot takes on the shit, so I better see you back here or else. Now, I'm just playing. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just saying, if you're cool, you will return for a Wicked video. Okay, now this video is over. Later, Gator. Bye.